I now call on Deputy Luke Ming Flanagan.
Thank you.
14 minutes left in the slot.
Here, look. I believe this is a mean-spirited bill designed by people who come from an area of low crime with no understanding of how people have got into the problems in the first place. Worse still, in this country, if you come from the right area, you will potentially not even have to go to court in the first place. I have some examples. On June the 3rd, I was heading for Dublin in my car for a meeting in the Dáil building when I was stopped by a Garda car. I had been using my phone and the Garda in question told me that I would be receiving a fine. I distinctly remember thanking the guard in question for doing his job well and that maybe his actions might in fact extend my life. I headed off on my business and received a fixed penalty notice in the post. A few days later, I bumped into a Garda sergeant who informed me that he was aware I had received a notice. He asked me what had happened and I told him the story. He told me that I was covered under the rule in relation to travelling to the Dáil. I informed him that there was no point, but he insisted that I write to the station and explain. I did so and no points were added to my licence. The name of the Garda in question I will supply to Minister for Shatter in order that he can use it in his internal review of the penalty points issue. Now, I had planned to name him in the Dáil, but had been informed by people who seem to know how this place works that I would have been stopped, and that would have been the end of my speech. And Deputy Durkan is kind of suggesting that. That is not all, though. In December of 2011, I attended a meeting in Roscommon County Council buildings. When I was approaching the roundabout coming up to the council building, I was stopped by the Gardaí and informed that I would be receiving a fixed penalty points notice because I was on my mobile phone again. I said OK and headed into the meeting. At the meeting, I casually mentioned that I had been foolishly using my mobile phone while driving and that I would be getting 2 points. The meeting proceeded and afterwards I drove home. I spotted my phone ringing about 10 minutes into my journey and I do learn a lesson eventually and pulled in to answer. On the phone was a senior county council official informing me that he had sorted out my penalty points issue for me. To this day, I have neither received penalty points nor a fine. Whatever about the case whereby the points were removed on the grounds of travelling to the Dáil, there is in fact no case for what happened in this situation. So not only is there a cohort of Gardaí who are going around asking people do they want points cancelled, but it appears that there is a franchise system going on whereby if you are cosy with the senior Garda, then you too can have people's offences quashed. So when it comes to the spent convictions bill, it is, as I have suggested, a bill which has been put together by people who come from areas where crime is very low, and even if they do commit an offence, they'll never have to face the charges. Now, the Garda Commissioner and the Minister may not believe that this is true, but the Garda Commissioner has said on announcing the penalty points fraud investigation that there is no question of what has been described as a culture of non-enforcement of penalties being tolerated by An Garda Síochána. How can you explain my experience then? I did not ask the Garda Sergeant in question to get involved, but he insisted he should. I do not believe it was an attempt to trip me up. I believe it is a culture which has festered for years and that all the Garda was doing was what he had learned along the way. Whatever about that, it is quite extraordinary to think that a senior county council official would feel confident enough that approaching a senior Garda would enable him to have penalty points quashed for a citizen. Now, many people will say, why did I not release this information before the press released some of it? Well, I had understood that it was illegal for the Gardaí to release such confidential information. Strictly speaking, I was really the only one who could release such information, and had intended to do so upon the publication of Minister Shatter's internal review. Now, that wasn't my original idea, but eventually, as far as I was concerned, I worked out this is where it would have the most impact. The intended effect of this would have been that on the day that the review was launched, I would have been able to clearly show that there is systematic abuse, something which I believe the report will attempt to whitewash over. Last week I attended a court case in Loughrea in order to support my fellow turf cutters. In the court that day, several people were up on penalty points offences. We are told by Minister Alan Chatter that people who have had their points revoked had so for good reason. Yet in the court in Loughrea, it was quite clear that people put up a case, many far stronger than my own, as to why their points should be revoked, were just ignored, and in cases 4 points given. In fact, I had a similar experience myself when I appealed penalty points in Roscommon Courthouse some years back, and I had a very good legitimate reason. There was a priest visiting my father-in-law in hospital because he was on his deathbed. I was given 4 penalty points on appeal. So here we are talking about a spent convictions bill, which does not do what it says on the tin. At the same time, the supposedly important people, I'm one of them now, like myself, do not even have to go to court in the first place. For justice to work, it must be seen to be above favour. Our system is not. Corruption is like rust. It starts out small and cannot be seen, but if it's not kept in check, it corrodes everything. This is what is happening within Garda Síochána. It started out as something small and has ended up as a situation where now we have a case where people even feel confident of covering up a murder of a priest who was such a good man that he was named Roscommon Person of the Year. I have now contacted the Fines Office in Clare and asked how can I go about getting what should have been imposed on me as a punishment in the first place brought back, namely my fine and my points. I finish by saying, I now call on the reported 15 members of the Dáil and the Seanad to come out and tell us, were they approached by the Garda Síochána, or did they, in a proactive way, go to see could they have their points removed? And then maybe on this issue, for a start, the spend convictions bill, we can talk about it with a little bit of credibility. But we cannot, so long as we have a system in this country where the important people never have to go before the courts in the first place. Thank you.
Deputy.